All right, hey, how we doing out there, guys? So, kind of, I'm gonna turn the volume down on my mic. It sounded like I was talking to my own sinuses there. Okay, so third episode here, kind of talking about my time in Fallujah in during Operation Phantom Fury in November and December of 2004. So, in kind of my last episode, it sort of ended on November the 7th, 2004. So November the 7th, 2004. So like I said, I kind of ended where I managed to secure for myself the opportunity to go get some chow at the mech, and under the auspices that I was going to bring some back for my driver and my fire teammate Gooch. That's his actual name, Sean Gooch. And they would not let me take a hot plate, and so I, without the intention, I ended up screwing over my comrade. So that was not good. He eventually forgave me, I assume. I never asked him specifically about that, but so as I said, that so we went to the mech, and we kind of got chow. So we kind of flashback over in here a little bit. So we're over here. So this is Camp Fallujah. My battalion firm base is basically over in this area here. So this was obviously the evenings or early evening of November the 7th, 2004. So we get back, and this is the night that we take off to go stage. And I don't honestly remember what time we left. It was after dark. I mean, it was like dark, dark by the time that we actually left. And so where we actually ended up staging for November the 8th was right in this area here. I don't know exactly where. I mean, this is not a particularly large not a particularly large area in total. All I know is that we went north of, we went on mobile, we went north of the city, and then we were just out in kind of the secluded area. And again, I'm no mathematical genius, but it has to be this area somewhere. So we take off at night for this, and again, like I'd kind of alluded to in my previous episodes about this, we were under the assumption like that what we were doing in Fallujah was not at all what ended up like happening. So it's kind of one of those where like I don't know if it like actually changed or if it's the way they briefed it or what, but they kind of made it sound like we were gonna like our Lima company was gonna be the main effort, like doing the fighting, and India company was gonna be like in reserve, but we were gonna be like in vehicles to help them and like move stuff forward to them and move stuff back from them or whatever, which is not at all what happened. So it's just like again, I don't know if it was just a bad briefing or if things changed. I mean, there's no possible way that they could have assumed that they were going to have the battalions lined up that they did for Phantom Fury, and they're going to be like, hey, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, which are like my battalion was the main effort battalion, they're only going to have one of their companies forward, which would make absolutely no sense because historically speaking, the very typical way that you operate is 2 up and 1 back. Whether you're talking about companies or battalions or regiments or platoons, whatever it is, you typically have 2 up and 1 back. So I don't know where they got that idea, but so we drive like kind of through the night, and I remember it was really kind of freaky. Like it was kind of surreal when we got to the Cloverleaf right here because like I said, this entire area had been completely off limits. Like the Cloverleaf was the like the delineation mark. Like no American forces went west of this between May and November. And it was like a known thing like hey, you come around the Cloverleaf, you're going to get in contact. And so for us to be kind of coming through and then driving around this, and I don't think we went through the actual Cloverleaf. I kind of think at the time that there was sort of a road, or they had made a road or something, kind of like right off of that. I don't remember actually going through the Cloverleaf. But granted it was pitch black out. But so we kind of like skirted through here, and so they had the whole like thing like lined up with like infrared chem lights and stuff. I mean, obviously this is a big undertaking, so they're moving multiple battalions. So I don't remember exactly all of the units, but so for the units that were participating in the actual assaults, you had, my unit, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, you had 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines. You had a couple battalions of from the Army. I want to say, well, you had an element of the 2-7 Cav. You had like, they're like a 2-2 brigade. And so there's a lot of elements that they're moving, through this. So it's it had to be some pretty well orchestrated thing. So we get out to this area, over here. It's still nighttime, and so we basically dig in next to the vehicles. So we all kind of dig like little foxholes next to the vehicles. It was really like, it's kind of like hard, like stubbly ground, so we didn't get very far. So we kind of just dug basically like, a pit to crawl into when we take ID, like indirect fire. So then we're out there basically all day. And again, we don't really, like, again, I'm just a Lance Corporal nobody. So like I have no idea what's going on. So we get out here and we're like staged, and so we don't know who's doing what or when what is started. But, we've got like our battalion 81 millimeter mortars are set up out here, and other people's mortars are set up out here. And then they're kind of working the city over with all this indirect fire and supporting arms stuff. And I'll be honest, like pretty much, probably like most, or at least a good chunk of grunts, like sitting out there and like seeing all the firepower they were putting on the city. Like I was absolutely terrified that there was going to be nothing to do when we got there. I wasn't at all terrified of like fighting. I was really excited to get into like a good stand-up fight, but I was absolutely petrified that by the time they actually like turned us loose to go down there, that there was like going to be nothing left. And so I remember like sitting there like all day, kind of thinking to myself, I was like, man, like I hope they stop. Like, I hope they stop shooting the city with like air power, and like, man, I hope they stop hitting it with artillery. And which in hindsight sounds stupid, but when you're 19 and when you're really excited, it's like you don't. You don't want somebody else, taking your action, taking your glory, like having your fun. You want to kind of, you want to do the work and you want to get the credit, and you want to be involved in all the cool stuff so that you got the good stories and stuff like that. So we sit out here all day, and we took indirect fire like coming in on us, not a ton, but we definitely took some throughout the day, and it was a really long day because we had nothing to do and we were in a pretty tight perimeter, and I assume like the other battalions and stuff were kind of staged, somewhere, I assume that pretty much everybody was just basically kind of staged, out in this area, kind of relative to where they were going to be, going into the city. And so I'm actually going to flash over to my map. So I've got it's not an actual map, but it's a satellite photo of the city circa 2004. So it actually doesn't quite show enough. But so you can see the cloverleaf here. You can see the train station here. So I'm going to flash out, I guess, one more time here to kind of get us a little bit associated. So where we're just at with the train station, that's right here. So none of this existed. There's absolutely no buildings, no nothing out here at this time. There's just the train station and then nothingness. So that's very new. Or granted, this is like almost 20 years ago. So it's new anyway. So we sit out here all day during the 8th. And this is where they worked, like sniper teams, and some reconnaissance elements and stuff like that forward, calling in airstrikes, things like that. And now granted, it's like things that did not happen to me personally. Like when I talk about this, it's either things that I read or if it was within my unit, like typically like things I talked to people in my unit. And honestly, it's taken me this entire like 18 years to put a lot of these things together, because tracking down people, asking questions, or just like having conversations and things come up. So always kind of keep that, a little bit in the back of your mind. Like if I'm not saying that it's something that I did personally or saw personally, there was some other way that I acquired the information from somebody else. There's always a little human element with that kind of stuff. So we sit out here all day during the 8th, and then it gets to be nighttime, and it starts to rain at night. Like it rained like all night, which really sucked. And so basically, what we're doing is, so we had this like company of Iraqi like army guys with us, or Iraqi National Guard, or whatever they were with us. And so they were going to attack the train station here with our Lima company. And so so all of us are loaded up into vehicles. So we have Humvees, we have like the troop carrier Humvees. We have like one or two. Like I can't remember. My Humvee might have been the only one that had an actual turret in it. And then we had Amtraks as well. So amphibious tractors, like a Marine Corps kind of staple. And that they had people in those as well. So they're very lightly armored. They have like aluminum armor, tracked vehicle. They have a double turret, or it's a single turret with a double mount on top. It has a 50 cal and it has a Mark 19. And you can hold, depending on how much you want to cram them in there, you can hold damn near a whole platoon of dudes in the back of there if you want to be incredibly uncomfortable and follow the textbook, kind of capacity of that. So we have everyone in Humvees and Amtraks kind of rolling towards the train station, and then we see stuff kick off. I don't know if there's like actually any resistance in the train station or not, but they sure made a big show like there was. Anyways, at some point during this, one of the Amtraks, so we're like on some sort of little road over here. One of the Amtraks rolls off the road like onto its roof, and I don't think anybody got hurt, but they had to unload. Like we had to stop for a long time because it was out of commission, so they had to like unload all of the stuff, So all of our ammo and packs and things like that were in the vehicles somewhere. So they had to unload all that stuff. So I want to say that we took off at midnight. I mean, I if I remember correctly, it was midnight, so it would be technically like, the first instant of November 9th is when we actually took off, when Lehman Company attacked the train station there. And it basically took us all the way until the sun was coming up to get into position down here. Okay, so now I'm going to flash back to my other map here. So, like I said, so Lima Company and the Iraqi army guys, they attacked a train station down here. So then as well, so this road actually had berms kind of built on this side of it. So we had the army had their their battalion, the 27 Cav that was taking part. And to be honest, I don't know exactly where they were or where they started because units shifted around during the battle. But when we approached this road here, which kind of makes a very nice, like, exact delineation of the edge of the city, and that I remember very specifically, they had one of their armored combat earth movers, so like one of their kind of tracked little bulldozers, and they had like punched a couple of breaches in the berm, because basically it was built up as kind of like an anti-tank berm, anti-vehicle berm. So they punched a couple holes in there, and then there were a couple Bradleys that were kind of just roaming around on this road, and to me, like, if I have to just use my examination eye and kind of use a little common sense, my assumption is that they moved out from some position a little bit further to the east earlier than we did, and basically kind of suppressed or shot at or otherwise intimidated, and made their presence kind of known so that we didn't take contact from like this first row of buildings that like actually stymied our ability to get into the city. Because like I said, as we came up here, we kind of got on this road here, and there's a couple Bradleys, and then they sort of drove off back over towards the east. So now, this was actually kind of a really cool like instant. So as we were coming from the train station, so this is actually a little bit of distance, right? So if you try to look at the train station here relative to the city, and then you look at the city blocks relative to each other, this is like a few blocks worth of space. So it's not like a trivial amount of space. And it kind of slopes a little bit downhill, like slopes towards the city. So we're in our Humvees, like heading, towards there. And it's, like now, like in the modern sense, like we don't get any more like, like the Marine Corps thing is like, World War II, Higgins boats splashing towards the beach, gonna land on Okinawa and Iwo Jima and, Tarawa and Peleliu and all those sort of places, like that's all the things that are burned in our brains. And so we don't really get exactly the same thing, but this was kind of our, heading towards the beach moment. So as we're coming towards the city, like you can see, tracers and stuff flying all across the city in all directions, hear explosions and things like that. And I remember it was kind of funny because I'm standing up, like, standing up tall in my turret, kind of looking. At this point, like I still had my gun covered with a poncho because, like I said, it had been raining all the night before. So I kind of like, as we're moving, so I'd sort of take the poncho off, and the gun was in in a half load. So the Mark 19 it's an open bolt weapon. So it's weird how you load it. So you actually load the first round into, you get a click. You pull back on. It has two charging handles. So you pull back on both charging handles, put them back forward, you hit the spade grip, and you send the bolt forward. So then when the bolt goes forward, it catches the first round. And then when you actually want to like make the weapon, like full load or ready to fire, then you grab the charging handles again and you pull back and lock it to the rear, and now it's ready. And so basically the way that it cycles is as the bolt goes forward, the grenade is pushed to the bottom of the bolt, and so it's pure blowback weapon. So as it hits the barrel, hits the chamber, it fires that one off while it grabs another grenade directly above it. So it's kind of an interesting way of loading it. So as we're moving kind of down this like little slope, take the poncho off, we're going, I kind of reach up, and and it's always like when you see it in movies, it's always kind of cliche and stupid, you know, like they're kind of, you got the big speech before the battle and then everybody like draws their swords at the same time. And it's always kind of dumb, but it's like, there's always like part of you that's like the first time, like you kind of like, you know, like when you load for like a legit battle, you're kind of like, all right, this is legit now. And I kind of felt like that. So, you know, pull back on that sucker. And I was like, okay, we're heading into the city. And we still don't really know like what's gonna, like we have no idea. We're like, hey, like as soon as we get on this road, are we just gonna like, everybody's gonna pile out? We're gonna like just start jumping in buildings and just like, you know, getting into it with dudes, or what exactly is gonna happen? But as we're rolling down, like I said, this area like kind of slopes down towards the city, and I hear this kind of like this sort of wind up from the speakers. And we had an army psyop, you know, psychological ops, so the guys who would like drive around and place like messages on their speakers and stuff. I kind of hear this like wind up of like noise, and immediately like I know what it is, but like I'm not 100% certain what it is. And then as we're heading towards the city, like it kind of builds up. Dun 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 dun. So they start playing freaking Wagner, Ride of the Valkyries, as we go towards the city. And I'll be honest, I thought that was cool as shit. Like I felt like a freaking walking Viagra pill at that point. And so they start blaring, you know, Ride of the Valkyries, you know, like right out of like, you know, Apocalypse Now, when the air cav guys hit the village on the point. So we're like, okay, this is kind of cool. So we roll down, get onto this road. And so now basically where my battalion was, so a kind of a little administrative point. So within the city of Fallujah, all of the north-south running roads had male names, and all of the east to west running roads had female names. So for example, this road right here is called Route Henry. And Henry, I remember very well because it's a major road and it runs all the way to the end of the city. So now, this right here is Route Michigan, but within the city of Fallujah itself, Michigan is Fran. So then where it curves off here, this is Fran. And then this little stretch right here is called Elizabeth. So I remember those very specifically. There's a couple other ones that I remember a little bit further south, I think more or less. Those are kind of some of the major ones. So Henry going north to south, Fran, big one here, Elizabeth, smaller one there. So we roll into the city, and now this is, I'm going to have to speak with my knowing after the fact hat. So basically, what my battalion's mission was essentially to infiltrate through this north part of the city. So like this is Jolon Park right here. So you guys have probably heard of that, like very infamous area. So my battalion's mission was to infiltrate through this part of the city and then squeegee clean basically everything south between like Henry and Fran, like this area here. We didn't really know it at the time. But so guys who've watched my other videos, so when we talk about like infiltrate means to more or less to avoid large scale contact when possible. To do the minimum amount of fighting that you can and the maximum amount of moving without getting yourself separated and ambushed and put into really bad spots and things like that. And now, like what we know in hindsight is the reason for that was that 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, they kind of came in more in this northwestern corner, and then their job was basically to squeegee clean this area, so north of Fran and west of Henry, whereas we did south of Fran and west of Henry. And so I don't know exactly where they came in or what time or anything like that, you know. So like that's a little bit, that's beyond my purview. But like I said, we came in roughly around here, and then we were kind of delineated. And our hard cutoff point was Henry, and so the next battalion over, their area of responsibility started there. In this particular case, it was 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. And so the reason that you do that is so that, one, you don't have issues of like losing, you know, contact and control of your units and stuff like that. But then like also that way, you know, and it does provide, you know, it does cause some problems, but that way, you know, like, hey, if you're going to shoot across Henry, you have to inform and or get permission from, in this case, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, and vice versa. That way you're not shooting into one of their buildings and it turns out it's their guys, or vice versa. So that way you have very like hard, solidly delineated areas of responsibility versus just, you know, kind of everybody having at it. So we get into the city and we start infiltrating our way through there. So like all the guys are dismounted except for the drivers, and then obviously like myself, like gunners. And so we're basically, we're kind of just, sort of like classic kind of World War II movie stuff. So they're basically moving even with the vehicles. We also have a company of tanks attached to us, or rather, our company has a platoon of tanks. So our company has 4 tanks that are attached to us, basically. Or, well, I take that back. At this time, the tanks might have only been attached to the battalion, and so not technically chopped out to the company yet. So the tanks are kind of in front of us, kind of doing their thing. And then the dismounts are sort of next to the vehicles, and we're kind of moving on the roads. But obviously, like, guys are in, they're making entries into houses over here, and we're getting into firefights and getting into scraps and stuff like that. And so we're kind of like working our way here. And this is all just a jumbled mess. So if I zoom in here, and like I said, this is a picture from 2004. So you can see just like how tightly packed stuff is. So I think we came in closer to Henry, but as we like worked and wormed our way back into stuff, we ended up like back over here, like my platoon did, and so working our way through there. So we started taking contact like just instantly, like the second we got into the city, and it was kind of like sporadic, and so we were, dudes were getting into houses and shooting some guys, and we're having some stuff, take place. The tanks were doing a lot of shooting because obviously they're out in front of us, but they have also got thermals and, and they have, obviously just like optics, with like good zoom and things like that they can actually look with. And so we're kind of working our way down. So like I said, we roughly, kind of started off when the sun was coming up. So at this particular time, I don't know what time that actually means. We work our way through here, and it takes us a few hours, kind of, getting our way down here. But, kind of a couple incidents that I saw myself. And so we got, somewhere in one of these, like, tighter alleys, these tighter neighborhoods over here, we had one of our fire teams. And so it was a fire team from my squad, kind of make entry into this house. And they take contact out the back of the house, so kind of by the alley. And so as they go to run across the alley to try to make entry into this house that's adjacent to it, the first guy to go across is a guy by the name of Corporal Sergeant, which is funny. He got out of the Marine Corps as a sergeant, which is funny. So he's the first one to cross the alley. My Humvee is actually just parked in the middle of the alley. But the alley kind of bends slightly, like as I was looking down it, it bends slightly away to my left. So like it's not just a straight linear shot. Like I can't just see like purely all the way down it. Like as I'm looking at this, like, in my head, I'm like, oh man, could you possibly find, which alley that might be? And I'll be honest, there's no freaking way, because it's so jumbled and so like tightly quartered. And, and kind of, packed in down there, but it's probably more like somewhere, up in this region over here. But so the alley bends a little bit away from me. And so Corporal Sergeant runs across this little alley. And as he runs across, the gate going into that house has a padlock from the outside. So he turns back and is actually facing back towards the other guys. And this is a brain fart on his part. And so he goes to bust the lock off with his rifle, so shoot the lock off. And as he's doing that, another guy in my squad by the name of Parrot runs across the alley. Guy at the end of the alley that I couldn't see takes one shot and he hits the wall. So as you imagine, like, Parrot is running across the alley. So he hits the wall that would basically be kind of like right in front of Parrot's left eye. The round ricochets and hits him right in the right bicep as he comes across. So you hear this, like, so all you hear is like crack, whack. And he just and it was really funny, as much as you should not say that it's funny watching people get shot. But so he wasn't hurt that badly, but the only thing he could say was son of a. Like he didn't get any like real words out for a while. He just goes son of a. And so he's kind of bleeding from the bicep. And so so at this point I was kind of telling my driver, I'm like, hey, Gooch, pull forward like 10 feet, and I'm gonna try to nail this guy down there. And my platoon sergeant was kind of nearby. And he's like, no. Like, you can't see if there's any friendlies down there. Like, hold off. Like, okay. So we kind of back up a little bit. So at the very least, I'm not just sitting in the middle of the alley and looking to catch an RPG there. So Parrot's kind of sitting on the, by this wall over there. And as they're kind of looking at Parrot's arm, and he's fine. Like, he took a shot in the bicep, but it's that's a fairly minor wound comparatively. So then another guy in my squad is kind of standing a little bit, so so my Humvee's facing, perpendicular to the alleyway. So the driver's side doors are like directly at the alley, and I have the gun aimed down there. And then so kind of off at my like 10 o'clock is another guy in my squad by the name of Joe Welke. And Welke's standing there, and guy takes another shot, or some other guy takes a shot, and it ricochets either off the wall or off the Humvee and hits him right smack dab in the ass cheek and takes him clean off his feet. And boom, hits the ground. He gets up. He's like, oh shit, what was that? And so we look at it. So obviously, like all great Marine Corps stories, there's a guy who has to just drop his pants in the middle of a in the middle of a firefight. And so it didn't even penetrate. It just left this like really big purple welt on his butt cheek. And so he's kind of limping around. And so then what makes this story, you guys who are in my unit, understand it. But, my platoon sergeant was a very, very overbearing, yell happy kind of guy, like they all are. But so he tells one of the guys in first squad who's kind of attached to, one of the vehicles, he tells him to run back to my Humvee and grab the black bag. And for some reason, he didn't spit out any more details or any better words. So this guy, his name's Leatherwood. So Leatherwood comes running back to my Humvee, and he's like, Grease, Staff Sergeant Max sent me back here to grab a black bag. What's he talking about? And I was like, I don't know, man. And so he opens the door and he starts looking through, and the only black bag in the Humvee is a body bag. So poor Leatherwood grabs a body bag, runs back over to Staff Sergeant Mac, and Staff Sergeant Mac just boots him, kicks him right back out into the street where Welke just got shot in the ass and where Parrott just got shot in the bicep. And he's like, you think a wounded Marine wants to see a body bag? Like, get that shit out of here. I said to grab the black A bag for the M240. We're like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, you definitely didn't use those words. But, okay. So he grabs the A bag. So the A bag is where you keep, like, your spare barrel and tools to work on the machine gun, stuff like that. So we're kind of farting around with that. So Parrott ends up having to get evacuated. So what happened with his was, it was actually funny. So he has this tattoo on his arm of like a little fighting Irish guy. And so the bullet actually went in under the front of it and kind of got lodged like on the back of it, but it went completely under the tattoo. So when they ended up having to do surgery to remove the actual bullet, they actually didn't have to cut through his tattoo and ruin his tattoo. So that was kind of a funny little anecdote to that. So we're kind of, just getting through the morning, and there's more stuff like this that's going on with, with dudes and things like that. But that was a funny one because I saw it with my own eyes. So, like I said, we're moving our way down through these roads here, and we end up on this road here. And so this road runs into, we just call this the diagonal road, and this is Jolon Park right here. So as we get to there, here's where we ran into like actual Army guys, like in their Bradleys down here, and they were facing towards the west. So, I remember seeing like a couple Bradleys. One of them was aimed down to the west over here. And so we're, at this point, we've got guys dismounted, but we're still just moving with our Humvee. So it's not that we had hadn't stopped, because we'd stopped and started. But like I said, we've primarily just been trying to move, infiltrate our way through the city, as best that we could at this point. So remember, as we passed one of the Bradleys, and I told this story in one of my other videos like a while back. So as we passed one of the Bradleys, so the Bradley has a 25 millimeter Bushmaster chain gun. It also has a like an M240 as a coaxial machine gun. So as we're driving past this one Bradley, I just hear brat, brat, like coming from the 240, and I'm like, oh shit, what's this guy shooting at? And so right as we kind of get up to it, so I peek out and I look at what he's aiming at, and there is a dude down there, I don't know, like 150 yards away, who's like playing chicken with this Bradley. So I see this guy kind of like peek out, and like his whole body and chest is kind of peeked out from the corner. So he peeks out, and then he like peeks back, and the guy hits the coax. Guy peeks out again, peeks back, hits the coax. So I saw like 2 or 3 bursts, and he hadn't hit the guy yet. So like I don't know what's going on with it, but we're still like we're rolling through here like kind of slowly, and I'm kind of like okay. And so as we pass these Army guys in the Jolon Park area, this is where we heard over the radio that we were weapons free to the west and south. So basically what that meant is that up until this point, we must have been moving roughly in line with, vehicle elements of the Army's 2-7 Cav and things like that. And then pretty much once we got to like right here, then we'd pass them, and they whatever their mission was something something different than ours. And so then what weapons free meant is that we did not have any friendly elements that were to our west and south, which meant that if we got engaged in that direction, we could shoot at it without having to worry about any friendlies being out there from a unit level. And so we get on this diagonal road here that's coming up. And as soon as we get on this diagonal road, things just start picking up really, really quickly. Like we start taking some mortar fire and like a lot of RPG fire. And it's kind of surreal, because I don't say this in like a bragging way or like a, we're so tough way, but it was like, for all the times that we'd taken, we'd had guys take a few pot shots at us or get in a hey, they shoot 3 rounds, we shoot 4 rounds at them kind of like engagement, like prior to going into Fallujah. It was basically just constant shooting the entire time that we'd been in there thus far. So it was like, and by now it'd been a few hours. So it was like, there was just like, like whizzes and zips and snaps. Like that's just what it sounded like the whole time. And so like, you were kind of like a little bit accustomed to it, because obviously, with things spread out, enough, they could have been shooting at somebody hundreds of yards away and, just having it zip down the road or whatever. But it really starts to pick up on this road here. We start taking a lot of RPG fire and stuff like that as we're working our way up. And so here's where we actually have a guy in my platoon get severely wounded by an RPG to the head, and so he had to be evacuated, and we took more casualties with that. And so we're working our way, just up this diagonal road. And like I said, this is Route Elizabeth. So for us, Route Elizabeth is infamous, because Route Elizabeth is where we got in just like the most amount of fighting. And so by this point, it's still like mid-morning. I don't know. It's got to be around like, 9 o'clock or something like that in the morning as we're working our way through. So I actually have, I don't know if this will show, I've never played like a YouTube video clip while having my recording software like record and then also uploaded this to YouTube, but we happen to have a camera guy attached to us that took a little bit of video. So I broke it into a couple places that could just, help me, kind of, set the scene a little bit or describe the environment a little bit here. So so as we're moving up through here, so basically my whole company is on this road, and by this point, my vehicle is kind of in the back. And so the company gets up to here and then turns to go back this way. So what I think they're trying to do is basically consolidate closer towards Henry. Because like I said, so Fran is the major road that runs through here. So Michigan, i.e. Fran. And so crossing Fran was always going to be a big deal. So I think they're basically trying to get us into a place where they could get like people set up now to kind of start the formal, like, hey, now we're online. Let's do kind of the formal clearing ops kind of thing. So we get up here to where this diagonal road hits Fran, and this is as far in as this will zoom. But this right here is it's like a, like a 5-story, like kind of a department building. So you can kind of look all along the road here. So these are all really tall buildings. They're like apartment buildings that are kind of in here. And then you can kind of see these buildings. This is kind of like a little compound, and you'll see this in the video here. And then these are all like relatively tall buildings. And then down here, one of these buildings down here was another like 5 or 6 story, like apartment like type of building. So we kind of, sort of in between those. So as we hit here, like I said, the company turns and kind of moves back to the east. And so my platoon sergeant comes back, and, he kind of tells my driver, he goes, hey, I want you guys to hang out here, as this last squad, like to give cover to this last squad as they move up. And the last squad just happened to be like the remainders of my squad. And so I'm parked basically, we're like in the road, and not like parked. We're kind of like just moving real slow. And then we kind of move, and we're sort of just like right here in the street under the shadow of this big building here, while the squad kind of moves back around. So now, like I said, on this diagonal road, I mean, just constant, firing. I'm not saying it was like, wasn't like MG42s, on Omaha Beach or anything, but it was just constant like zip, 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 whiz, whiz, snap, snap, kind of going back and forth, and RPGs kind of blowing up like, this building over here and that building over there. And, just kind of a constant thing. And we get to Elizabeth here, and as my vehicle kind of gets to there, it is like dead quiet. And my spider senses are just like absolutely screaming, you know, because I'm like, you know, I've watched enough war movies, I've read enough books that like I'm like, oh shit, like something's fixing to go down here. So right as the squad, like the kind of the last element of our company, you know, the last element of our platoon sort of makes this turn here, it just freaking goes down. This building right here was just absolutely chocked full of dudes, and they just start shooting down on us from all the windows. They're in multiple other buildings down here, and they had several, like multiple guys that were like further down in these buildings here, like shooting down the road. So as it goes down here, I just immediately I turn. I've got the Mark 19 aimed at that building right there, and the stairwell was kind of facing towards the road, and so it's just like all of a sudden she's just like crack, 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 snap, 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 snap. You know, like all these rounds hitting the ground and hitting the vehicle next to it and the buildings. And they're not just shooting at me; they're shooting at the other guys that are dismounting and stuff as well. And so I got the Mark 19 aimed at that, aimed at that building, and I clack off a burst. You know, so like bap, 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 bap. You know, it's got a real slow rate of fire, right into that stairwell, kind of that side of the building that I could see, and like. As I hit it with a burst, it would go quiet for a second. Then everyone would start shooting again. Then I hit it with a burst and go quiet for a second. Then I hit it with a burst and go quiet for a second. And so I hit that for, probably about half of a can. So cans, are either, like 32 or 48 rounds. I had a 48 round can in there. So I hit this for, probably about like, 20, 25 rounds into the building. And all of a sudden it jams. And so what I would come to find out like later is, so like I said, it had been raining the entire night before. I had my gun and everything covered with like a poncho, but enough rain still got into the bottom of the can that the links of like the bottom, kind of row of rounds or two had gotten rusted. And the way the Mark 19 works, the links fit together very differently than they do on any other machine gun. So it's like literally, instead of the round just fitted into kind of a little like coupling that like grips over it, it's actually like a male female. So there's like a male end that just physically locks into the female end of the one behind it. So then when it goes to chamber it, it has to be able to wrench that apart, and it takes some legit force. And so because that got a little rusted, it couldn't pull it apart, and so it jams. And so as it jams, like things are just freaking going down, and they're going down like basically along this whole stretch. So whether intentional or whether just situational, they'd basically gotten us into an ambush between essentially this building here and what's probably something like, this building like here. So down there. So I've got my M16 with me as well. So I immediately have my rifle, and so I get it up. And so I told my driver to move, and I was like, Gooch, move, move, move. And I start just, so I start, shooting rounds off with my rifle at the side of that building, still trying to suppress, because we still have multiple guys dismounted right here, that are kind of moving, and everyone else is kind of out in the street over here. So my driver, so we're kind of here. So he kind of like moves and moves and moves, and there's like a little median, like kind of a semi median in the middle of the street there. And I'm gonna flash out to my Google Earth and see if like it looks any better when we zoom in, like currently. It's definitely looks different, but yeah, you can get an association for it there. That's actually not too bad at all. So you can see how there's kind of this like semi-median right there. So like I said, so we're basically right under this building here. This little traffic thing wasn't there, but so we're basically right under this building here. And this is actually a good view, so I'll kind of flash ahead here for a sec. So you can kind of see these are like tall, like apartment type of buildings and stuff like that. But so I tell my driver, I'm like, Gooch, move us, move us, move us. So he kind of like, is like, wah, 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 like moving the vehicle all around here. We kind of go like boom, 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 up and over this. I'm like, stop. So I'm trying to fix the Mark 19. And I'll be honest, like at this point, I don't really know how to use, like, I don't know how to fix all the Mark 19 problems, because like I knew how to load it, knew how to shoot it, knew how to do some basics of it. But, I didn't really lie, but I did not go out of my way to tell anybody how little experience I had with it when they asked if I knew how to use the Mark 19. I was like, yeah. So he kind of like, we kind of like ramp up and over this, stop for a second. So I shot a few more rounds with my rifle. I'm trying to get the gun fixed. We ended up almost making like 2 laps or something. It was just like hectic, but you can see this isn't very far. So literally we just end up, for all the moving that we did and kind of like doing this, we basically end up right there, like facing back towards this building. And so finally, and he was driving kind of erratic enough and hit that sort of median, and then there's like, like bumping me around, and I was like, So I was like, stop, stop, fucking stop. And so he stops right there, and I'm facing towards this building here. So at this point, I'm basically like, hey, I'm just going to sell out on, on getting the Mark 19 back into action. And so while I'm trying to get it, I see a couple of, so I've got some guys dismounted right here that are in my squad. So Lance Corporal Thompson's over here. My buddy, Big Michigander Hoffman's there. My friend from the previous story, Leatherwood, is kind of back there. So we're right here, and I'm basically trying to get this fixed. And so so a couple of funny incidents with it while this is going on. So I kind of look to my left, and so my friend Hoffman is standing right on this wall by this building here, and he's shooting over here. And this is like something out of like, man, I don't know, this is like something out of a freaking war movie or whatever. It's kind of one of the coolest things I've seen because it's like he's like right next to me. And so Hoffman leans out with his saw, and he just cuts a long burst, like all into this building here. And so as he kind of cuts into it, then he sort of ducks himself back. And so when he kind of ducks himself back behind like the edge right here, you just see like bang, 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 like all these rounds impact right where he was. Like somebody else with a machine gun, like just hit that like back where he was. So I can kind of see him, sort of taking like a couple, like sharp breaths, like he's trying to psych himself up into going back out there again. And again, all this happens in a couple of seconds, right? But so I look, and so Hoffman, I can see him kind of like trying to psych himself up to go back out there. Now, mind you, like he had just like every single inch of where he was like standing when he shot that last burst just got raked over by somebody else with a Soviet PKM. So he kind of like psychs himself up, and then right when I can see him kind of like lurch forward to lean out there to shoot again, instead of moving out there, he just sticks the saw out there with his arms and just goes brrr, and just kind of cuts off a long burst with that. And as he's doing that, whoever was on the other one, bap, 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 hits like stitches all up and down that wall. So he kind of, pulls the saw back in again right there. And I remember, it's funny because like you're kind of in the zone or whatever. And I was like, well, that was kind of comical, It's like so then, at some point during this, my friend Leatherwood from the previous story of the two guys getting shot by the alley, he comes running past me and he goes, Grease. And I was like, yes. And he goes, I got shot in the finger. And I was like, what? And he goes, look. And so he shows me, and it's his pinky finger, and it is very clearly, it is an exact crease of a 7.62 round. Kind of just looks like a little canoe mark like scooped out of his finger going right across. So basically took his fingernail off, went like right kind of diagonal across the front of his pinky. And, it was bleeding obviously, because it went through there, but it was like an exact, like, you could have taken an unshot 7.62 round, pulled the actual projectile out, and sat it in there, and it would have been absolutely perfect. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. So, and so while this is going on, like I'm trying to like get the Mark 19 fixed, and so at one point, so I've got the feed tray cover up, and the feed tray cover on the Mark 19 is pretty big. So I've got the feed tray cover up. And as soon as I put it up, it goes bang, and it gets knocked back down, like it got hit by either a bullet or shrapnel or whatever, like right in front of me, and gets thrown back down. And I was like, well, shit. So I pop it back up, bam, gets hit again, like knocked back down. I was like, dude, what the hell's going on here? So I pop it back up again, and then took a couple more rounds, like off of the gun shield there. And so at this point, I don't really know how to fix this. So all I'm doing is I'm racking this thing a whole bunch of times, trying to get it to shed one of those rounds that has the bad link on there. And I racked it so many times in like a 30-second stretch that my forearms were just absolutely fried. Like if I'd been like, climbing a freaking rope in gym class like all morning, like that's what it felt like. My forearms were just absolutely fried. So I'm like racking. Nothing's happening. And so finally I get the bright idea in my head. So I take one of the charging handles, the one on the left, and I pull it back and I drop it and I hold onto it with my left hand. I reach under with my right hand. I just grab the grenade that's on the bolt face and I just pull it out in kind of a circular motion, get the grenade off the bolt face, throw it out on the street, send it back forward, and then I get this thing back in action, and so finally get this thing back to going, and get back into it. So I'm going to flash over to the video here. So one thing I'm going to state is like if you want to look up this video, the cameraman's a guy by the name of Kevin Seitz. It's very good video footage or whatever. None of it is chronologically correct at all. So it's very hard to use it for anything other than to just kind of understand like what the environment looked like. And so I'll kind of flash over to it here and, sort of flashback. So here, I wrote down the times of when a couple of things happened. So this first one is just going to be the way it gets introduced in the video. Like this is what, kind of like instigated the ambush. But one thing that you'll see is like you'll see an RPG hit the wall, which is kind of, one of the things that started everything off. But then you'll see it kind of flashes to where then he's standing on a different side of the road. And so that encompassed like minutes and minutes and minutes of time. So there's a point where like we're all kind of standing like in Elizabeth facing to the west, but this is way after we'd already kind of spun around, ended up back on that diagonal road, ended up back out there again and all that. But it gives you a good view of what the environment looked like. In this spot here. And I hope this is a smart way of doing this in video. But I'll let this play out here for a second and let you guys kind of see it. So this is me over here in my Mark 19 Humvee. So this is the building I was talking about. As you can see, like now we're kind of pulled back a pretty decent amount. So this is way after I'd gotten it fixed. I'd actually switched to a different can of ammunition. And then I basically just, kind of unloaded the entire can into that. The guy that you actually saw shooting a rifle a second ago, that was Leatherwood, who got shot in the hand. So this has actually gotten pulled a little bit further away from it. So this is a few minutes later. But it shows you a little bit like what we're working with environment here. So I'll let it Okay, so like I said, we're kind of dealing with that. So you can see this is where the diagonal road kind of meets up, and there's that sort of like little circular area, and that's the big building that we're kind of under right there. So I'll flash back so you can kind of see. So that's the big building that we're looking at, is this one right there. So we're down dealing with this. Dealing with that building for like quite a while. And again, I have no concept of how much time it was. We're down there for a substantial amount of time, kind of trading back and forth with them. And even in like the video clip that I just showed, like it's kind of as soon as it shifts where the camera is on one side of the street to the other side of the street, you can hear a couple rounds go straight past on that. So we're dealing with that building, and other guys are doing. And so this is the compound, that we're standing sort of next to. So other guys are dealing with other stuff going on down there. So we're down here for a while. We're pretty much, at least for me, pretty much all of my contact is coming from this building here. Because it was like I could see muzzle flashes in the windows. And, and there's lots of things going on with that. So we kind of get pulled back to where we're basically like right around here. And that's kind of where that particular part of the video is. So we're still dealing with this building here. Now, I don't know if I was aware of it at the time. I don't really remember. But there was also guys down here, at least one guy down here with RPG, who shot probably in the course of a couple hours. That dude had to have shot 60 RPGs down the road. He had to have been sitting on a cache because it was just constantly, like all morning, like they're just flying past us like the whole time. So we're dealing with this building. Other guys are in contact up there. And I didn't know at the time, but we'd already started to take, like company-wide, like we'd already started to take pretty decent casualties dealing with that. And so, and obviously you can kind of see like we're sort of out in the road, because we just don't really have any, like I said, we're just trying to infiltrate through. So at some point we're kind of still dealing with this. And so then they basically, like they start telling the guys to start clearing these buildings out right here. So one, they want to get Marines into the buildings to get them off the street so they're not as susceptible to, especially like RPG, but also machine gun fire and stuff like that. But then they also, they obviously, if there's like dudes in these buildings, they want to like, get them cleared out of there, push them back. So we've got a little bit of buffer space here. So as we're dealing with this here for a bit, at some point they call tanks back. So like I said, our company had 4 tanks attached to it. The tanks were all the way up here in the front somewhere. I don't know. So then they get called back to come back down here. And so what we end up with is basically 2 tanks sit on one basically in each lane of the road facing towards the west down here. And then the other 2 tanks, one sits right here facing towards the south. and the other one sits right here facing towards the south. So what we basically use them to do, and I've got a couple, I'll show a couple clips from that video on there. So one, obviously they kind of, start hitting this building with main gun round and stuff like that. But then basically what they were doing is buying us a little bit of a buffer zone here and here to keep guys from being able to maneuver closer to us while we sort of dealt with these buildings, company wise. So I kind of flash back over here, or well, I guess I kind of like, as I'm sitting down here, and this is where, like, people who know me, like, I'm pretty hard of hearing. And this is actually pretty much where it came from. Is so as the tanks came down and set up, pretty much as soon as they got down there, they just started cycling through main gun rounds, like 120 main gun rounds. And the way they were set up is they were basically parked one on either side of my Humvee. And I was kind of still, I mean, obviously, like, not even with them because, like, you get killed by the overpressure of the gun. But like my Humvee is basically even with their vehicles as they're firing. And so while this is going on, we're still taking a lot of fire. And so eventually we kind of pull my Humvee back a little bit. So I'll kind of flash over to this clip here. And so you'll kind of see, again, like I said, the video stuff, it bounces around a lot. So it's hard to use it to, like, get any sort of chronological understanding of what's going on. But it's good environmental clips. So this one, so you'll kind of see like everything's just covered in dust around here because the tank's been firing main gun rounds. Then you'll see my Humvee's kind of far forward, like, in front of the tanks. And you'll kind of see, sort of get pulled back and, a dude kind of lights off like a, like a distinct machine gun burst kind of, shooting at me there. So I'm going to flash ahead here. One of our sniper section guys. He's back a little bit behind the Humvee and stuff, so. You can hear those kind of like two distinct machine gun bursts, kind of coming. So you kind of see, again, this is like kind of funny because, like, when I remember, so you see all the dust down here. So the tanks have been firing like crazy, and so you see, like, however it ended up, it's like my Humvee's like still up there, and so as we pull back, like, dude clacks off a couple bursts at us here. So we got the tanks down with us. So once we get pulled back, we move them up a little bit. So you can still kind of see the tanks separated there. And this is where these two will kind of move forward. And then the other two sort of peel off and each one cover one of the kind of, the alleyways that face towards the south there. So I'll flash ahead a little bit just to, tanks kind of shooting at this main building. So you guys kind of, this will give you, a good environmental feel for what that looks like as well. And just kind of some of what we were doing to it here. So yeah, so tanks sat down there and they shot at that for a very, very long time and a lot of rounds. So a lot of this part of the morning then gets, all kind of crushed together because, so we get pulled back and like I said, at this point, like where you can see in that video, I'm basically kind of set up along this sort of compound right here. So at some point we kind of pulled my Humvee back a little bit more, and so we ended up more like right here. And like I said, we're still taking all sorts of fire, and dudes are fighting. And again, like, there's guys on all sides of us because obviously it's not like this is cleared. So there's still enemies in this section over here as well as, south, east, and west of us as well. So they've at some point we've set up a casualty collection point, which is probably like in this building, like right there. And so we've got Marines that are kind of working on getting under the roofs of these buildings and clearing them out and stuff like that. So as we're working down there, so I've got the Mark 19, it's back to functioning. I've been firing it. And I want to say that I had something like 600 total rounds to start that day with. And by the time I was done shooting that day, I fired 300 or 400 rounds at least. I fired almost all of what I had, basically before resupply for that day. So you used a lot of it. And then at some point I had my rifle, so my M16 that I was still using, but I also had my driver's saw up there. So I shot a lot through my driver's saw. So I'm kind of trying to get things a little bit back on track chronologically. So as we move back to here, I was kind of sat out in front of this, kind of probably this building right here for a while. And so other guys from my squad were kind of in like the doorway or like the little, whatever you want to call it, like kind of little archway here. And we were kind of just jawing at each other, because it was like, this process took like a couple hours. So it's not like this was just like pure trigger pulling every second for 2 hours. So obviously there's a little bit of ebb and flow, but like, there's still a lot of shooting and a lot of fighting going on around here. And so at one point I'm looking down Elizabeth, and somewhere right around here, probably like this road here or this road here, and I have my driver's saw up on top of my turret. I see a vehicle drive across the road, and we had been briefed that all vehicles were going to be destroyed or disabled prior to us going in, and any vehicle that was moving was like automatically considered positive ID to engage. And the reason for that was the car bomb threat. So they had basically told all the people in the city to take their vehicles and get out. And then they'd had Apaches and other people come in and stuff like that, variously and shoot at, or probably Cobras, I suppose, come in and shoot at vehicles and stuff like that. So as this vehicle goes to drive across down here, I had my saw up there. So right as I just, I'm looking down there and I see it drive across like kind of real slow. So I cut into it with the saw, and right about the same time I did that, one of the tanks saw it and started shooting his 50 cal at it. So the tank kind of hit like all along the hood, the engine area with the 50 cal, and it kind of started to slow. And as he did that, like I kind of walked my tracers like right up into the driver's side door with a good like 50 or 60 rounds, and the door popped open, and nobody ever came out of that, and it burned for quite a while down there. So we're kind of sitting outside of this, and at this point we're kind of trying to get things like figured out, at a unit level or whatever. And like honestly, like obviously, like I have no idea what's going on. Aside from like I'm just kind of moving here, moving there. So like I said, so I'm basically roughly here. So we have one of the tanks facing south is right there. One of the tanks facing south is like right there. If that's an alleyway, if not, it's that one. That's not the important part. It's probably this one, based on my next particular observation story from it. But so as we go to move across here, so we're kind of pulling back a little bit, basically trying to get everyone up here because we're trying to get people into a casualty collection point. And like I said, I'm trying to observe. I think this is the area that's like a little market area. So then maybe the casualty collection point was more like this. It's just, man, it's hard to see from this angle, what it is. But anyway, so I get up around this alley. And so as I go past it, and we're still taking fire from the south. So like none of this is at all secured. My platoon sergeant, tells me, he goes, Grease, when you roll past that alley, I want you to put a whole can, down that alley. And I said, okay. And the turret was broken on my Humvee. So like, you guys see probably the videos now, the guys have the one with, it's got the hand crank and you can pull up on the latch and move it and relatch it and then like we didn't have anything of that. It had the little latch, but like mine, like all the bearings were broken. So to get it to turn, what I usually had to do is I would put my rib cage and like the back of my, my hard plate for my armor against it. And I would put my hand out on the Humvee and I would pull on the Humvee and like use my whole body to turn the turret a little bit when I had to move it. So as we go to roll past this, I'm trying to turn my turret to face directly to the south, so it would be perpendicular, on the vehicle, and I can't get it turned all the way. And so we get pulled in front of this alley right here, and so my driver's just kind of sitting there because that's what he was supposed to do, and so so I'm kind of waiting there, like still can't get the turret moved. And all of a sudden, like, crack, 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 whiz, 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 start taking fire like directly. And this isn't a very far distance, from here to here. So anyone like, kind of in that area could see us pretty readily. And so finally I was like, I was like, Gooch, back up, Gooch, back up, back up. And so he backs up, and when he backs up, he basically just puts us, there's kind of this little awning right there. So we just come under the awning. So finally able, boom, turn the turret and get it facing back towards the south, and then said, okay, I'm ready, pull back forward. And so when he pulls back forward, and I'd managed to piece this together, like years after the fact with multiple stories. But so as he pulls back forward and I get in front of this alleyway, there is just multiple, like just dudes running across the alley with weapons, people over here throwing like weapons up on the wall and shooting down here, and so I just cut into the whole lot of it with the Mark 19, and I was really surprised because I was like you never see that many people clustered together like in the global war on terror. It's always like you could barely see a dude, or you find ones and twos here, but a whole bunch of them run across the road. So I laid into it with a whole 48 round can from the Mark 19, and by the time I finished the can, couldn't see anything down there. It was just all dust, and it was just dust, and I could just hear screaming. And I was like, okay, well, hit something down there. And so what I found out happened, after talking to friends and things like that is, so our second squad, so some of my friends in our second squad had basically made entry into this building and had gotten mixed up in some contact with some guys here, and were kind of pushing up towards the roof and pushing through here. And so they were kind of driving them out of this position. And then what must have happened, and this is just me trying to, use my thinking hat a little bit, is that as I pulled in front of this, people who could see me must have saw me. And then when we pulled back, they must have assumed, okay, whatever they were doing, they're not doing, or maybe they're not going. So they must have seen that as like their opportunity to try to run from one side of the road to the other side of the road to get into different buildings. And then they must not have been expecting us to pull back over like pretty much like right away. So as we pulled back in front, like I said, there was just like all sorts of people, out there, and just like obvious as hell, like, carrying weapons, running across the road. So just laid into him with that, and kind of like took care of business as far as that goes. And so now we're kind of stuck in this area for quite a while. And this has been kind of like a really long episode, and I think I kind of thought I'd be able to get all the way done with November 9th in one episode, but I think it's going to take me so long to do. I'm going to get a little bit off track with it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it a day, because this kind of represents actually a little bit of a good delineation between what we're doing. So once we kind of had all this contact, we'd worked this building over, we kind of got things, we're sort of getting things a little bit under control. And then we kind of got into like a little bit of where we're sort of like under siege on this road. So we kind of get to, my Humvee gets kind of, put over here. And then this is where we hear over the radio, company command or battalion command comes over and says, get all gunners out of their turrets, all Marines dismounted. If you can take the guns with you, take the guns with you. But otherwise, we want all gunners out of their turrets. Because apparently what had happened is like our Kilo company and weapons company, who are, basically between us and Route Henry up here. So there's basically, I think we had like 6 total vehicles on this road that had turrets. Mine was one of them. And 3 people had gotten shot in the face or neck by either snipers or, otherwise people aiming for them in there. So they basically kind of come over with this like, hey, we need to get everybody out of the turrets. If you could dismount the weapons and put it into the buildings, or whatever, do that. So you could still, obviously, so you could still employ them. But they wanted everybody out of that. We also started taking, we're taking a lot of RPG fire. We had been the whole time, but it was staying very steady. And we're starting to take some indirect fires, like mortars, either that or like rifle grenades and stuff like that. And so this is where my platoon sergeant coming through again on this one. So I hear this come over the radio, and so I wasn't going to get out until somebody had come and told me specifically, because that's kind of the protocol, which is like, if your company commander says something, but, he's not directly telling you and your platoon sergeant's, like around or whatever, that you kind of wait until, or at the very least, you kind of just look over and get the nod and you're like, okay. But because he still, has to have accountability of his guys, or whatever, because you don't know that he heard that message. So what you don't want to do is be like, oh, I heard that, bam, dismount, get in one of these buildings. And then he comes over expecting there to be a dude, and a ready machine gun in a place that there's not. And I'm kind of sitting there, for a few minutes, and he comes over, and he goes, Grease, are you all right? And I was like, yeah, I'm good, Staff Sergeant. He goes, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to stay out here, and I want you to try to spot some of their FOs, and either and get some fire on them, or help us spot them. And so FOs is forward observers. So i.e. like the guys who are usually forward observers, like used in reference to like indirect fire, mortars, artillery, stuff like, or, air power, things like that. But technically speaking, when you're using RPGs and other stuff like that, like a forward observer could just be anyone out there who's kind of helping you adjust to follow you around. So he goes, I want you to stay out here, see if you can see if you can locate some of their foreign observers and kind of deal with that. And I was like, okay. And then he just goes, doop, and he just like bounces off and ends up in some building doing something. And so then I was kind of like, okay. And so at this point, my driver's still in the Humvee, and I'm in the Humvee in the turret, and we are the only two people. We were the only two people on the street. And so, like I said, we're somewhere in this area here. Because you can see by the shadow, I hadn't noticed this before, but you can see by the shadow that these are the tallest of the buildings here. So we're somewhere, around these two buildings here. And so now we're just kind of sitting out there. And I definitely started to take a lot more fire, on our Humvee, kind of at this point. Like, I don't know if you call it sniper shots or just pot shots. It's like what makes somebody a sniper versus someone just taking some pot shots at you. So I'm not going to try to figure that out. But so we're kind of sitting out there, and we kind of, like I said, we kind of started a little bit of a new phase of this initial part of the Battle of Fallujah. We're kind of under siege here. But I think that's where I'm going to end this episode today, so that it's still a little bit in digestible pieces. But also, I don't want to get myself so deep that I either start leaving out details just because I'm trying to get it finished, or, just start, losing my ability to enunciate and talk very clearly. So we'll pick this back up with the next episode, where we're kind of a little bit under siege in this area right here. But remember, guys, only the hits count, and you can never miss fast enough to catch back up.